Hello, Katniss. Hello, Sue. Hello, Subi. How you doing? Yes, this should be an interesting show. That electronic artist was Reznor of Nine Inch Nails, who, he was kind of graphic when he was younger. Although I always loved Nine Inch Nails stuff, but he has actually turned out to be a really cool, good person. Father of four. Who could have imagined that Reznor would actually be one of the people contributing to the future of the country? So I have a little bit of a soft spot for him. And thank you, Peter. Thank you guys for joining. What are we going to talk about today? Well, I never will be the end-all, be-all expert on the talk of the town, the talk of the world right now. Of course, that person is Jeffrey Epstein. But there are definitely avenues, there's definitely areas within the story of Jeffrey Epstein where very few other people have treaded. And as I've said before, as Jonathan Cooey, Gigaohm Biological, by the way, it's Gigaohm, Gigaohm Biological, I think it's .org, right? Make sure I have that right in the chat. For those who want to check out his channel, you could also watch his latest videos on PeerTube, which is linked to on his website. That one of the most important things when doing analysis is to build upon a solid foundation. If anything is wrong as you go through your analysis, your data collection, then everything built on top of that may also be erroneous. Now, you have to word it very carefully. I reposted my fallacies video the other day. I shouldn't say my fallacies, but my reading of someone else's listing of fallacies. You can use bad logic and still have the right answers. Just because you use a wrong assumption, that doesn't necessarily mean everything you say after that is inherently false. But it certainly negates the guarantee that it's true. And in this case, with Jeffrey Epstein, it is very important that all of the assertions that are made, and there are many, many assertions that are being made, that they are built upon something solid. And there's so much noise about Jeffrey Epstein, and there's so much written, there's so much tweeted, that I think it's easy to overlook what the basic underlying assertions are about the career of Jeffrey Epstein. I'm not really interested in learning about the career of Jeffrey Epstein for the sake of learning about all of these, the more fantastic claims of sex and of children and occult stuff. I don't believe in most of those interpretations at all. Having been aware of the world of drug addiction and how that impacts adults, young adults, and children, both with respect to broken families, prostitution, and so many other things. I've seen more than enough to be overwhelmed with having seen bad things. And I already know what's real and what's not. I already know what causes so much grief, so much regret. I don't need to see anymore. And I think it's unfortunate that the real causes of so much of that behavior in our society is being overlooked right now because of the assertions of Jeffrey Epstein and that type of occult stuff. And I find myself being depressed, having to walk through the filth of all of these stories which have been led about Jeffrey Epstein. But as I've come to realize that it's Jeffrey Epstein, he is not a leader. He is a tool that has been used by a machine which is way bigger than him and way bigger than any pile of money that you can ever imagine. And I get back to my roots of seeing how the bigger agendas of trying to understand the evolution of the human species and even getting involved in controlling it. When we get back to talking about the Manhattan Project, Joshua Lederberg, the Human Genome Project, how this worldwide movement of getting as many people on board as possible in this grand experiment, how it impacts geopolitics, the nation state, etc., I find myself getting back into my good zone. So my endeavors about Jeffrey Epstein are really not about embracing the salaciousness. However, I will give you this much. There are populations that are very interested in things such as the king and queen, the royal family of England. And I don't know if they're conservative or liberal. I'm not really sure it falls into conservative or liberal groups. Some of them are pro Meghan Markle, some of them are against, some of them are pro King Harry or against, or Prince Charles or whatever. But they are in a different domain. And I see a huge overlap between the life's journey and the professional and social network of Meghan Markle and Candace Owens. That's undeniable. We're talking about the same peers, same coworkers, same timeline down to a few months, and then a lot of the same weird phenomenons happening in their life at the same time. What does it mean? I'm throwing out some wild speculation. I did so in a video short that I made. I republished it this morning, cleaned up a little bit. I wouldn't bet my life that it means something very, very specific. But at some point, when you look at so much evidence, and I don't mean just loose correlation, but same friends, same social network, same peers, same timing, same windows, having the same life events around the same time, it's absurd to think that it doesn't mean anything. Meghan Markle and Candace Owens are among the two most spoken about, included within conversations, women in the world right now, at least with respect to United States and Europe. Also, three of the most popular hashtags of the last 10 years, Megxit, Brexit, and Blexit, can all be attributed to two women. How is that possible? And you wonder how Brexit comes in there. Well, Candace Owens did marry the family that provided perhaps more financial support for Brexit than anyone else. So Brexit, Blexit, Megxit can be fully encapsulated within two people who have the same social network, much of the same professional network, Epstein connections, and lifetime career event timing. But I do know that this incredible correlation means something. So I'm right now looking for an opportunity to get people who are interested in both of those to see that there's an opportunity to learn more by studying the other side, because I know there is. I've learned a lot about Candace by seeing the odd coordination with Meghan Markle and vice versa. I never cared about Meghan Markle, but now that I can learn about Candace Owens through Meghan Markle and vice versa, this is incredible. I'm showing on the screen here covers from Radar magazine. Now, the one that I'm really going to be interested in this show is the one that's right behind me. These are the first two issues of Radar magazine from 2003. Radar had no issues in 2004, and then in 2005, again, Paris Hilton pops back up. So Paris Hilton is on 2 of the first 3 episodes of Radar. Now, in 2005, Radar is bought by Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein was a potential investor when Radar was booted in 2003, but he is the owner of Radar in 2005. So 2 out of the first 3 episodes of Radar have Paris Hilton on it. The second one is Paris Hilton and her sister Nicky Hilton. And then also in 2005, we have a Tom Cruise, we have Angelina Jolie. Then they reboot again after Jeffrey Epstein sold it to Yusef Jackson, the son of Jesse Jackson. And remember, Candace Owens started working with Jesse Jackson with her race-based hate crime allegation at Stamford, Connecticut High School in 2007 and 2008. So Candace Owens, a young Candace Owens, teenage Candace Owens, meets Jesse Jackson around 2007, 2008. Jesse Jackson's son, Yusef, is part of the second reboot of Radar in 2007. It's a lot of information here. I'm not saying she's close with Jesse Jackson, but I think she's close enough that her whole career, her whole life journey is connected with Jesse Jackson after that in a way which she's never really too upfront about. It matters a lot. Oh, my goodness. If you continue on, I think it's the 7th episode is called Dirty Harry. And there's a lot of crazy stuff in this episode of Radar. Dirty Harry, Prince Harry, is September 2007. Now, Harry is on the cover of many magazines. So Radar magazine is not like the only magazine that has Harry on. But I think it's safe to say that one of Prince Harry's most provocative covers, you can almost make out the outline of his royal garbage, if you will, his royal junk in this particular photo, is on the cover of Radar. That's pretty impressive given the fact that Radar was just sold to Yusef Jackson by Jeffrey Epstein in 2005 and 2006. So there are some very crazy covers with Radar. The one I started off with was this one here, the B-List Nation one, with Paris Hilton and Nicky Hilton. And then there is Prince Harry one, Dirty Harry. That is September of 2007. Okay, so how does this stuff factor in? Well, because I titled this one about how Jeffrey Epstein met Leslie Wexner. I've highlighted a 2021 Vanity Fair article, which you might be able to access and read. You can definitely access it on my website right now, called The Mogul. I hate that word because I know I'm always mispronouncing it. And The Monster. This came out in August of 2021. It's a Vanity Fair article. One of the many mysteries that still surround the life and crimes of Jeffrey Epstein, the source of his wealth and thus his power, might be his greatest. His relationship with his most prominent client, billionaire retail magnate Leslie Wexner, holds the key. So, whether or not this is true or not, whether or not Jeffrey Epstein really is all about Leslie Wexner, you can decide for yourself. That is an absolute statement that you need to agree upon how exactly you would measure that. I think it is safe to say that there's an abundance of focus on this relationship. If you open up any book, any article about Jeffrey Epstein, there is a tremendous amount of focus on L Brands Limited, Leslie Wexner, a billionaire American Jewish man who lives in the central Ohio area, Columbus, Ohio area, and for a while owned, maybe still owns Victoria's Secrets and a variety of other interests. He's also diversified into real estate and a bunch of other things. And Jeffrey Epstein, somehow or another, for real, became a money manager for Leslie Wexner, in the late 1980s. Now, Jeffrey Epstein didn't exactly have a great client list. He didn't have a lot of money, and he didn't have really even an office. Somehow, he was able to weave his way in and get influence and power and control within the money management business and the investment handling of Les Wexner at some time in the mid to late 1880s to the late 1980s, nearly 40 years ago. And because Leslie Wexner is a billionaire, he's not like top 10 billionaires, but he has billions, which is way more than most people will ever have. So he's in the top, 200, 400 list. Okay, he's got a lot of money. Therefore, Jeffrey Epstein has access to capital. And it's this relationship that is spoken about so much. Now, Les Wexner is a Republican. He's I guess, somewhat fiscal conservative. So everything that Les Wexner then touches is therefore also contaminated now because of Jeffrey Epstein. I think one of the reasons why this is bubbling up so much right now is because Les Wexner from Ohio, being from Ohio, has also been a donor to J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance, although he was born in West Virginia, I think, he ran and he became a representative in the state of Ohio with some support for Les Wexner. Now, I don't think it's fair to say that J.D. Vance is a far right conservative by any stretch of the imagination, but he's generally conservative. And I actually really appreciate how professional, well-spoken he is. So all of these attacks on Les Wexner and the hyper-focus on Les Wexner and Les Wexner connections to Jeffrey Epstein, and also, by the way, all of this hyper-focus on Turning Point USA, which has a very favorable stance in promoting J.D. Vance, all of these are indirect attacks on J.D. Vance. All of these. That's really what this is about. Les Wexner's old. With all due respect, he won't be alive in 10 years or 20 years, definitely, but he's not going to be around forever. They're not worried about his wife having an inheritance. Nobody cares about him, really. Now, I have some disappointments in J.D. Vance. He talked about the opioid epidemic. I wish he would be doing more about it. I think he's spread too thin. But overall, look, I will give credit when credit's due, and I think he carries himself well. He represents the country well. In many cases, he's in a can't-win situation no matter what he does. If he tweets or doesn't tweet, if he says something and doesn't say it, he's going to get shot for it. But I'm modestly, all things considered, more optimistic than I think many people are about J.D. Vance being an adult who's not going to go out of his way to work against me all the time. All right? So there you go. And I don't feel as though I need to apologize for that. So all of these avenues going after Wexner, for example, it's all indirectly about J.D. Vance. Don't let anyone else fool you otherwise. And J.D. Vance on the world stage is a very interesting character because he's married to this gorgeous American woman who happens to be Indian. And I think this is providing a real problem because I think J.D. Vance's wife, whose name I should know off the top of my head, she is playing as if she is more interested in having a strong America than making her Indian heritage the center of everything. This, I suspect, is a problem because if you look at most of the podcasters, researchers, channels, even politicians who are going after Les Wexner and going after Turning Point USA, it's all the same thing. They will never mention the existence of India. They never mention Richard Verma. It's all the same things that I've talked about in the past. I've gotten way off track right there. Let me reel it back a little bit here, okay? This relationship, the introduction of Jeffrey Epstein to Les Wexner is very big. First of all, it's going to help you understand how real is Jeffrey Epstein at all. Did he really just sit on a regular commercial flight to Palm Beach and talk his way into getting all this money and all this access? Is he really that amazing? Or is it fictional? I don't have all those answers yet, but I'm going to relay what we've been able to capture, what has already been captured for the most part elsewhere, and then get us ready to dig further over the next few days. So I'm going to read from the Vanity Fair August 2021 article first. It gives you a little bit of a background to Les Wexner, his money, etc. Of course, they're going to talk about there was an assassination of a money manager. You can get into that stuff if you want to. They talk about Epstein being found dead. I'm going to skip right into this part here. Les Wexner met Jeffrey Epstein sometime around 1986, according to this 2021 Vanity Fair article. They were introduced by Wexner's close friend, the insurance mogul Robert Meister, whose firm handled insurance for the limited. I spoke, meaning the person who did this article for Vanity Fair in 2021, I spoke with Robert Meister in April, and he opened up for the first time about the origins of Les Wexner and Epstein's relationship. It was history that Robert Meister, then age 79, now he's, believe it or not, age 84 or about, found difficult to revisit. Meister said, quote, "I walked away from Jeff Epstein a long time ago, and I've been trying to erase him from my mind ever since," unquote. Jeffrey Epstein struck up a conversation with Meister on a commercial flight to Palm Beach, Florida. Same place, by the way, where Mar-a-Lago is, where Trump has his main home. Rob Meister remembered being impressed with the young banker. In reality, Jeffrey Epstein lived in a one-bedroom apartment and ran a fledgling investment firm. Jeffrey Epstein had been forced to leave Bear Stearns in 1981, he told Security and Exchange Commission (SEC) investigators he had been penalized after letting a friend borrow money to buy stock, and there were irregularities with his expense account, and there were rumors at the firm about his relationship with the secretary, close parentheses. He was a great bullshit artist, said Robert Meister. People who knew Jeffrey Epstein remarked at his savant-like skill at impressing powerful older men. But again, this is all secondhand stuff. So let's move forward to the next paragraph here. Here we are. In hindsight, Robert Meister suspects Epstein aggressively cultivated him in the hope that Meister would open doors to his billionaire friends, like Wexner. Not long after Epstein met Meister, Epstein invited Robert Meister to play racquetball and started turning up in the steam room at his gym while he was using it. Robert Meister said, quote, in this 2021 interview, he's then now age 79, quote, "I'd be having a steam and Epstein would come in," unquote, Meister said. During one conversation, Jeffrey Epstein asked Meister to introduce him to Wexner. Epstein falsely said he had learned that Wexner's money manager was stealing from him. Epstein, a self-described financial bounty hunter, offered to help recover the funds. It was convincing enough that Meister arranged a meeting for Jeffrey Epstein at Wexner's house in Aspen, Colorado. Epstein was such a liar, Robert Meister said. In Les Wexner's 2019 letter to his foundation, he wrote that he hired Jeffrey Epstein because friends, quote, recommended him as a knowledgeable financial professional, unquote. Soon after introducing Les Wexner and Epstein, Robert Meister started hearing disturbing stories about Jeffrey Epstein's sexual proclivities. Quote, "Think of whatever the worst thing anyone could do is, and Epstein did them all," unquote, Robert Meister said. The breaking point came when Jeffrey Epstein showed up unannounced at Meister's Park Avenue apartment, New York City, with 5 models for Meister's sexual entertainment. Epstein thought he was bringing me a gift, Meister recalled. I told him, "Get the F out of here. I never want to see you again." That is so incredibly, totally unbelievable. Far from being an introvert like Wexner, Jeffrey Epstein was a social connector who populated Wexner's life with glittery people. Okay, so let's take a break there. The point here is that Les Wexner was introduced to Jeffrey Epstein because Jeffrey Epstein met a man who worked for some insurance company, I guess, that did some business with Les Wexner. And this man is Robert Meister. And that's all you know from this Vanity Fair article. Now, this introduction is covered elsewhere. It's also covered in Whitney Webb's Volume 2 of America Under Compromise, or Ruling America with Compromise, or again, some other nonsense like that. It reviews the general idea, and then it says, well, this Robert Meister used to work for this one insurance company. That one insurance company knew Israel, and Israel knew the guns, and it just goes straight down this. Are you kidding me? Les Wexner, by most accounts, by the definition of rich, is a very rich person. He's in the top 400. He's not in the top 4. He's not in the top 40. He's not even in the top 100. I mean, it's a lot of money. Most people would be overjoyed to have that much money, but he's not the richest person in the world. $2 billion can disappear. No one will ever know it's gone. I mean, that one person will know it's gone. But in a world with thousands of trillions of dollars, he's not that big of a deal. And the thought that Jeffrey Epstein targeted Les Wexner, of all people, if you're going to target someone, you're going to go for a bigger fish than that. I'm trying to show here how much of this backstory of Jeffrey Epstein is being populated by one person here. This is all secondhand accounts. This Robert Meister, who has no Wikipedia page, is telling us backstories about Jeffrey Epstein showing up with girls, Jeffrey Epstein showing up with prostitutes, Jeffrey Epstein doing this, Jeffrey Epstein in the sauna, Jeffrey Epstein with the secretary. All of this backstory of Jeffrey Epstein just being this rich pervert doing all these things is coming in secondhand from this one guy, one person. We have no other evidence about any of other this stuff other than Robert Meister. That's it. So who the hell is Robert Meister? Well, I think we expect him to have some money. Now, I don't have a well-populated page on Robert Meister yet. But here's Robert Meister and his wife, Wendy. Robert Meister and his wife, Wendy, become some of the richest property owners and developers in all of Palm Beach. At one point, they actually buy one of the shares of this estate that's only 1 block away from where Mar-a-Lago is in Trump. They have one property that's worth $80 million, another one that's worth $30 million. At one point, they had I think it was in the 1990s, it was rated as the best renovated property in the United States of America, and it was in Palm Beach. They bought one property that was owned by President, not McKinley, one of the ex-U.S. presidents down there. There was also a Standard Oil Company owner down in Palm Beach. Easily, he's a billionaire. His family, it wasn't Consolidated Food, but there were other investments that his parents were involved in. His wife, Wendy Meister, is also worth hundreds of millions of dollars. They could easily be worth $1 billion. So Jeffrey Epstein met a family, the Meisters, who, when you think about it, might have been worth almost as much as Les Wexner was. Why didn't Jeffrey Epstein try to get their money? Instead, we have to believe that Rob Meister, I guess, said, hey, Les Wexner, I know I don't know you that well, but why don't you invest your money with my friend who I met on the airplane and now I'm steam bathing with, Jeffrey Epstein. Robert Meister goes on as this insurance executive to become a vice president at AON Corporation. And although they are based in Chicago, AON Corporation owns, I think, the 98th to 105th floor of the second World Trade Center building that is hit by an airplane, although it is the first one to collapse. And they had, I think, 1,000 or so employees in the building on the day. 150 didn't escape. And it's also noteworthy that the Cosgrove phone call from within the World Trade Center about what was going on inside the building, and I believe he died, actually came from AON. So we have a huge part of this AON narrative also from the Meister family. But it's crazier than that. Remember, this is the Robert Meister who introduced, supposedly, Jeffrey Epstein to Les Wexner in 1986 or so. He has several properties in Palm Beach, hundreds of millions of dollars across several properties in Palm Beach, not to mention whatever other investments he has. He's most likely a billionaire. And if you think that it's too much of a stretch to talk about the man who introduced Jeffrey Epstein to Les Wexner as a billionaire, at least as of this time here, keep in mind, here we are at a party at a fundraiser for the ADL, Jewish Anti-Defamation League, March of 1998 with General Powell. So now we have people in the Judith Miller Germs book actually at the property of, the book that came out on September 9th, 2001. We have people related to the property of the Meister family. The Meister family that introduced Jeffrey Epstein to Les Wexner, I guess, in 1986. And there's all kinds of other, billionaires and luminaries that wind up showing up at this spot. We also learn that their son, Todd Meister, got his startup money somehow from Les Wexner. I think that was probably encouraged by Epstein somehow. But even crazier still, their son, Robert Meister and Wendy Meister, their son, Todd Meister, married Nicky Hilton. So Nicky Hilton, the sister of Paris Hilton, okay? Nicky Hilton's first wedding was to Todd Meister. Nicky Hilton's first marriage was to the son of the guy who introduced Jeffrey Epstein to Les Wexner. Now, this is captured elsewhere. I did a video, a live stream yesterday where I was venting about this. I deleted it because no one could find it. But also because I have to say, this was put together elsewhere in some pieces. But it's bigger than that because, as I showed here on this magazine cover, okay, this is Radar Magazine, where the second issue is Nicky Hilton and Paris Hilton. And the third issue is Paris Hilton and George Bush. Okay, this is a photoshopped picture, but it's basically all about Nicky Hilton. And Radar Magazine, with Nicky Hilton and Paris Hilton all over it, is owned by Jeffrey Epstein. So the Jeffrey Epstein magazine that's showing all kinds of pictures of Nicky Hilton and Paris Hilton on the cover. I can't blame them. I mean, it's paparazzi, okay? But this is the Jeffrey Epstein that made his money precisely from an introduction to Les Wexner. And that introduction to Les Wexner was made by the parents of Nicky Hilton's first husband. And what we know about Nicky Hilton's first husband, Todd Meister, is that their relationship goes back to early childhood. Now, they got married kind of young. It wasn't a shotgun wedding, but it was a middle-of-the-night wedding. Paris Hilton attended and so on. It didn't last very long. Nicky Hilton got married again. Todd Meister, I think, also got married again. You know, the curse of growing up rich, the white man's burden, whatever you want to call it, is something that he's had to deal with here. But it gets even crazier after that, because then Nicky Hilton then goes on to marry royalty in England. Nicky Hilton is now Nicky Rothschild. Now, I got some really bad news for people that like to talk about Rothschild all the time, okay? The Rothschild family is pretty wealthy, but I got some bad news for you. The Rothschild family does not control the earth. They don't control the banks. They just don't. They're worth many billions, but the Rothschild family does not control the agenda. They don't control the banks. They don't control the world, and they don't eat babies by the pound. They just don't. They're just another old, rich family at this point with a name that sounds it just kind of invokes certain feelings. Rothschild. It invokes certain images because of the legacy of the Rothschild family. So the fact that she married a Rothschild, I don't really find to be that interesting. Although I'm willing to say it in a video title if it helps get a click of maybe someone that goes, wow, this Houstonic channel is the only channel that seems to be making any progress. I make progress. That's what I do. So every once in a while, yeah, I'll throw a Rothschild in the title if it goes to show that we're actually making a little bit of progress here. This is absolutely absurd. Now, the accusations about Epstein is something that I was getting into a little bit of a groove of before. Let's go back here. I was highlighting how this Robert Meister here, but I was actually using the Vanity Fair article about Robert Meister here. He's the one that says that Jeffrey Epstein showed up at his place in New York City with 5 models for sexual purposes. He's the one that says Jeffrey Epstein kept showing up in the steam bath. He's the person that says Jeffrey Epstein kept talking about girls. He's the person who was key in laying down a lot of this legacy about Epstein, the perv, and the money. It's him. Another person, by the way, who lays down a lot of the legacy about Maxwell saying, hey, we should recruit you, is Paris Hilton. So between Paris Hilton and her sister, Nicky Hilton, and Nicky Hilton's ex, Todd Meister, and, of course, there's his dad, Robert Meister, you are actually drawing a line, okay? And you're drawing a line around all of these stories about this weird backstory of Jeffrey Epstein, the pedo, Jeffrey Epstein, the child molester, Jeffrey Epstein of this, Jeffrey Epstein, the convicted sexual this, the sexual deviant. Is Jeffrey Epstein perverted? I don't know. But odds are the nature of whatever he has done and has ever been convicted of is probably radically different than what is out there officially. I believe he actually pled guilty to things that he didn't do officially as part of his national security role. This would be Jeffrey Epstein. and you have actors such as this, other billionaires, where Jeffrey Epstein could have very easily gotten his money from them instead. Why does he need to go through some guy who owns a clothing store in Ohio? That doesn't make any sense. Unless, of course, you then also factor in another part of the Ohio story with Leslie Wexner. I have on here an article out of Ohio State University, who is among the top recipients of philanthropy from Les Wexner. And this is from October of 2001. A new DNA-based vaccine approach protects mice against anthrax. With Daryl Galloway. And it comes out of Ohio State University. There's a new genomics lab, by the way, which I think was built in part with Les Wexner money. So you could see how irritating it must be that Les Wexner is providing money to Ohio State University. Especially if you are in a program somewhere where you want that money sent elsewhere. I highlight this article in particular. I'm not saying that Daryl Galloway, then at Ohio State University, and then subsequently in the United States military with the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. I'm not saying that Daryl Galloway knows Leslie Wexner directly. I have no evidence to say that he does, even though he was a project leader. But he was, at the time of 9/11, working on testing a vaccine and vaccine technology, which would have been a DNA-based vaccine using plasmids from a company called Vical Corporation. Plasmids which were developed and patented in part by Dr. Robert Malone. The same Robert Malone who stood up the computing infrastructure at the Winberg Cancer Research Center, which is just a few miles away from where Flight 93 is said to have crashed, but definitely did not crash on the day of September 11th, 2001. The same Robert Malone who went on to start a company with this Daryl Galloway called Daryl Galloway and Associates sometime between, I wager, 2005 and 2010. The same Robert Malone that was a co-worker or a colleague with Daryl Galloway within the United States Defense Threat Reduction Agency, the DTRA. And maybe this was even going to be a DNA-based vaccine, which, who knows, might have been used on the U.S. military should have been a large-scale biological terror attack in a major U.S. metropolitan center. Exactly as the very first sentence in the book, as I've said before, Germs says. In fact, I have the whole reading out there, but let me read the very first sentence of the foreword. It's amazing a book like this came out, gosh darn it, on September 9th, 2001. So let's read the very first sentence. I've read this so many times. In December of 1997, 6 years after the Persian Gulf War, the Pentagon announced that it had decided to vaccinate its 2.4 million soldiers and reservists against anthrax. That is quite a way to start off a book that was being heavily promoted, that was released the day before the attacks of September 11th, 2001, and that refers to so much of the work of Robert Malone and so many things which would have been used if there really was a large-scale biological terror attack. But it gets crazier than that, because this book, Germs, is not just about the DNA vaccine. This book, Germs, is also about Project Jefferson and the testing of that DNA vaccine, which was run out of Ohio State University. So in other words, Bio 911 Truth, in a book that came out, written by Judith Miller, who Dad worked with Kirk Kerkorian, by the way, in Nevada. Judith Miller, the September 9th, 2001 book about the biological terror attack, which was perfectly predicted on September 10th, 2001, by then Senator Joe Biden, also makes extensive reference to both Battelle and Ohio State University, which were, at least Battelle didn't directly, but Ohio State University definitely did receive large donations from Les Wexner, a philanthropic, I believe well-meaning businessman in Ohio, who's, after his first marriage, happened to be vulnerable. It's kind of odd that we have this other man just kind of airdrop right in, Jeffrey Epstein, and have such a laser focus on getting to Les Wexner and funding for Ohio State University, which is also part of sponsoring Battelle and Project Jefferson that I have a page on, at the detection of anthrax and new pathogens. But it doesn't end there, folks, because this is where it just starts to get even more interesting. Put a pin in that. Put a pin in that. Let's go back to the photo here. We already know that General Powell, who is also in that germs book, happens to be making stops, making visits at the Meister family, the same Meister family house in, or at least one of their homes, in Palm Beach. That's fundraising for something or other. Right before 9/11, General Powell is referenced multiple times in the Judith Miller Germs book that came out on September 9th, 2001. How is that for just a random coincidence? Of course, probably the most frequently referenced person in this book is Dr. Joshua Lederberg, who was the president of the Rockefeller Institute from 1978 to 1990, the very same time that Jeffrey Epstein said he started working for the Rockefeller Institute. How is it possible that Jeffrey Epstein was becoming friends with John D. Rockefeller, hanging out at the Rockefeller Institute, helping with the Rockefeller Institute with money, but didn't know the president of the Rockefeller Institute, who's Joshua Lederberg? That's not possible. Jeffrey Epstein is a liar. And a lot of the backstory is fake. Also, keep in mind what we just read. We just read from Vanity Fair in 2021 that this Robert Meister, who introduced Jeffrey Epstein to Les Wexner, was so horrified at his perversion that he had to cut his relationship short. Well, I'm sorry, but that's a load of shit. Let's go over to the timeline, because the timeline shows that in 1991, the New York Times was chronicling continued investment between Leslie Wexner and Kenneth Lipper, who was a former deputy mayor of New York City, and Robert Meister and Jeffrey Epstein. In other words, Jeffrey Epstein and this Rob Meister and Les Wexner are all here still in collusion doing business together as of 1991. So any statement that this Robert Meister, who is described even by Whitney Webb as introducing Les Wexner and Jeffrey Epstein, that he cut his losses and ran because Jeffrey Epstein was such a pervert, they're flat out lies. Because in 1991, they're still doing some type of business together. I don't know what the full extent of it is, but they're still in business. And any suggestion that Robert Meister and Les Wexner's relationship was impeded by this, well, think again. Sadly, Wendy Meister died of cancer, again, just a few months before September 11th, 2001, May 7th, 2001, and as you can see here from the benefit that was held just after 9/11, this is March 3rd, 2002. Here we have Rob Meister with Abigail Wexner, who is the wife of Les Wexner. So Les Wexner and Abigail Wexner are going to the Robert Meister family here in 2002, not long after the death of Wendy Meister. And Wendy Meister's parents are also loaded. And then there's Abigail Wexner, who was previously Abigail Koppel. She was born Abigail Koppel. And her dad, I guess, was one of the founding members of El Al, the main airline of Israel. So she's loaded also. There's money all over the place here. Really, Jeffrey Epstein needed to find a clothing outlet owner in Ohio. That was the only person. And then, but before 9/11, listen to some of the stories. We're supposed to believe that Les Wexner, who somehow on his own was able to become a billionaire, buy the right stores, then made the mistake of hiring a guy, Jeffrey Epstein, that encouraged him to buy an airplane that was connected with the CIA and then was trafficking drugs and guns. Why would Les Wexner ever do that? That doesn't make any sense. It's almost as if Jeffrey Epstein's whole job is to be some sort of middleman with getting people associated with drug running, gun running, prostitutions, underage sex, pedophilia, cannibalism, and I'll bet you Jeffrey Epstein doesn't do any of it himself. His job as an intelligence agent is to dirty people, and that's it. That's his job, is to make things dirty. His job is to saturate everything that he does. Initially, because remember, all of these interviews about Jeffrey Epstein being a pedophile happened after 9/11. Before 9/11, Jeffrey Epstein is not a pedophile. Before 9/11, Jeffrey Epstein is not a convicted sex offender. Before 9/11, Jeffrey Epstein is not said to be showing up with teenage girls for a sex party. Before 9/11, Jeffrey Epstein isn't convicted of any of this stuff, especially the sex stuff. That's an after 9/11 type thing. Before 9/11, he seems to be doing everything possible to attach Les Wexner to all kinds of other criminal stuff. But then all the pedo stuff happens after 9/11. He is given a rebranding. After going through the Radar magazine exercise, as we have reviewed here, Jeffrey Epstein just adds another dimension to his persona. He pleads guilty to doing something to some kids or whatever, and then forever and ever, you can't say Jeffrey Epstein anymore without saying convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, child sicko Jeffrey Epstein, pedophilia lover Jeffrey Epstein, this and that Jeffrey Epstein, because it's all an act. That's all it is. And other stuff about Jeffrey Epstein being this and Ghislaine Maxwell being that come from Paris Hilton and other people that are connected to Meister. It's all an act. It's all a show. Sadly, while people are pounding their fists getting mad at me saying this because they want all this stuff to be true, real bad things really are happening to real people every day for real because of the drug epidemic. I just can't believe how fruitful the payoff has been trying to figure out how Jeffrey Epstein met Les Wexner. Now, the fact that Nicky Hilton chose English royalty, she chose a pasty white guy English royalty, just like Meghan Markle chose a pasty white guy English royalty, just like Candace Owens chose a pasty white guy English royalty. There's something going on here. You just can't say, that's just the way it is. Oh, going back, by the way, before I move on, I wanted to highlight this because they're having this benefit in 2002 for Wendy Meister, now the deceased wife of Robert Meister, who introduced Jeffrey Epstein to Les Wexner, is that if you go to her obituary, it says that among the biggest donors of her and her husband, again, this is May of 2001, just a few months before 9/11. The couple has also been involved in supporting the Sims School business, the UGA Federation Major Gifts Division, the YMCA of Greater New York, and the Whitehead Institute for Biomedical Research. In other words, the very institute of Eric Lander, the very institute of Kevin McKernan, who's still on the stage today, and David Baltimore, that very institute received money from Wendy Meister, a woman whose husband, we are led to believe, is the sole reason why Jeffrey Epstein met Les Wexner. With Les Wexner, as I just reviewed a little while ago, being one of the top donors to Ohio State University and the genetic research program there, which is working on a DNA vaccine just before 9/11. The same institute which is mentioned indirectly in the Germs book by talking about Project Jefferson and Battelle Corporation. Battelle Corporation is a major player in technologies that are related to identifying forms of life, both in satellites as well as on other planets, other moons, working at and that is a program, the program of exobiology, a program which was actually started and a term that was even created by Joshua Lederberg. Joshua Lederberg, a name which is unmentionable anywhere. No one can say Lederberg. Can't say it. It's just off the table. Just like talking about India is off the table. You can't mention it. It's so obvious just based upon what people say and can't say. As a matter of fact, on the screen here, over here, I just happen to have Minsky on the screen here. And I did a video short about Minsky the other day. I don't know much about Minsky. I think I missed the opportunity to appreciate him when I was in the field of computer engineering. He, just like Joshua Lederberg, is one of the pioneers of artificial intelligence. I ran Minsky by Jonathan Cooey real quick just to make sure that he seems like a neurologist who knows what he's talking about, and he is. Minsky passed in 2016. He lived until his 90s. Minsky's whole life, unfortunately, has been reduced to an accusation that he went to Epstein Island and he took a $100,000 grant at MIT for artificial intelligence research. His whole life, all his accomplishments, has been reduced to a sex allegation. Another one of the reasons why I'm so upset and so passionate about this. Let people throw the daggers at me. I don't want to be, but as far as I know, I'm the only person who's consistently talking about 1 million deaths as a major demographic, catastrophic problem, social fabric problem in the United States of America, the opioid epidemic. I guess no one else feels as though it's worth talking about. And if they do mention it, they'll use the wrong numbers or blame it on the wrong country. It's all China, something like that. Anyways, Minsky was an associate of Lederberg, by the way. His whole life, all his accomplishments have been reduced to a sex allegation from the network of Jeffrey Epstein. And I think it's all lies to begin with. You really think this guy is going to go to an island so he can hang out with a young girl for a night? Really? I'm telling you, get older as a guy, you see yourself in the mirror, you're like, I don't want to do that. Sorry, I'm all done. You know, really, come on. You know, was he a perfect human being? I don't know. I don't care. But I just can't believe that. It doesn't make any sense. And the more that people allow these crazy accusations of sex compromise, you can control the world through sex compromise, which is basically the premise of all of Whitney Webb's work, which all came out perfectly in 2016 and hasn't advanced one iota since. The whole thing is built about one premise, that you can control the entire planet through sex tapes. And it's the stupidest idea I think anyone has ever put forward. Yeah, there's a lot of factual things that are correct in her books, but the underlying premise is that. And she never says that. It's just assumed. On page 1, before the first letter, the assumption is that you can rule the world through sex compromise, and her books are about how it happens. That's it. But it doesn't work. It could never work with me. And Jeffrey Epstein's very own books, as I showed in the Michael Jackson video, the Radar magazine even has an article that shows that sex compromise can be acted out without even involving the person that it suggests to portray. In other words, you can make a tape about compromise that's not even real without even using artificial intelligence or computers, just using good actors and good photography. Which begs the question, if a video can be released that shows something compromising, whether it's real or not, then why, even if it was real, why bother even stopping it? It's almost an admission that it's not possible. Maybe for one person here or there, occasionally, maybe. But in general, you can't rule the world through it. So the whole premise is wrong. The whole premise of all of Whitney Webb's book is invalidated right there. So everything built on top of that, some of it's right, some of it's wrong. But the premise that you just, once you got your sex tape, you control somebody is wrong. And it's very sad that we allow people to die every day in our drug epidemic with our broken families, not getting the education they need, the information not getting out there, because people enjoy promoting the lies about a all-powerful Rothschild family or sex compromise tapes. I don't know how to break through it other than to, continue to put more content out there, to continue to, fill in more gaps, archive more stuff. Every once in a while, maybe win over another supporter, and to continue to remind those people. I want those individuals that I seem to be fighting against to every night go to bed knowing that the last thoughts on the back of their eyelids are the fact that another person is going to suffer that day, so they got some money to buy their beer, to pay for their heater, to pay for their rent, to buy their car, or whatever the hell else it is. They make their living, they make their friends, they get their laughs by enabling pain of other people. It's sad that people are cashing in the chips on their own country and their generation and the next generation in order to make some money on super chats and PayPal. Of course, that's not their main source of income. They're paid otherwise. The property purchases of Epstein and West Palm Beach are amazing. So many realtors have known this Meister family. Meister probably even helped. Oh, yeah, I wanted to show you that. This Radar magazine, if you go to the 2005, it's a 2007 issue, I think. It's the issue right after Jeffrey Epstein sells it to Yusef Jackson. I'm going to tell you why I'm doing this. I believe that the entire narrative of everything that Whitney Webb has talked about was written starting in 2006 and you can and 7, and you can actually find it in these magazines. So this is Radar. It's it's War, the Paparazzi War one. I love that cover. It's a cool photo. It's sexy and it's cool. And here, so Jeffrey Epstein sold it. Yeah, here it is. Okay, this is the one. Jeffrey Epstein sold this magazine in 2006. Yusef Jackson, the son of Jesse Jackson, already an associate of Candace Owens in 2007. Yusef Jackson purchases it. And really in the first or second issue after Jeffrey Epstein sells it, so now we're in 2007, okay? Let me get out of the way here. They have this article here about the perils of Palm Beach. Now it is a two-page spread. So you don't really get the full effect. So there's the left page and there's the right page. And what this does is it lists out all of the supposedly bad places in Palm Beach. I think I can maybe show up here really small down in the corner. It highlights the Kennedy's compound. It highlights John Porter's house, the Breakers Hotel, the Brazilian Court Motel. It highlights Abe Ghostman's old house. It highlights a gambling boat. And then on the next page, it highlights Mar-a-Lago, the Trump place, Conrad Black's house, the Sullivan Mansion, the Wakeman house, Ann Coulter's house, and Jeffrey Epstein's house. And it even says Democratic fundraiser. Okay, oops. Come on, where's my mouse pointer? Democratic fundraiser, one-time Radar investor. That's a lie. He was the owner of Radar for a year. And horny financier Jeffrey Epstein allegedly stocked his seaside sex palace with underage girls who exchanged massages for cash and gifts. This was never documented before. And they even show pictures of 3 girls who look like Girl Scouts. So we're supposed to believe that in the age of empowerment, that women are just things that you can just keep in a closet, like sneakers, and they're never going to try to escape. You can just have rooms full of just generic girls. No one's going to look for them. That's it. It doesn't. This is so stupid. But the narrative here turns. So after Epstein sells Radar, he then becomes, you remember, he pleads guilty to a couple of underage charges to child prostitution or something like that. Of course, child means 17, 16 or 17, soliciting a young adult, a teenager, whatever the exact charges was. He pleads guilty, even though pleading guilty is going to ruin his entire business. But he does it anyways. He doesn't fight it. Even if it's true, he should have fought it, but he pled guilty. It's almost as if Jeffrey Epstein acted in a way where he wanted to be guilty. Because then everything he's done, every photo, every handshake, every book, every plane ride, everything he's ever done up until that point, he is Jeffrey Epstein, convicted child molester. Every single handshake. Every time he offered someone a drink, every time he waved to someone, Jeffrey Epstein, child, convicted, whatever, child this. And now the magazine is even promoting it. And make sure you know he lives near Trump. Of course, on here, they miss the fact that, believe it or not, Jeffrey Epstein, I should say the Meister family, which introduced Jeffrey Epstein to Les Wexner, is closer to the Trump home than Epstein is. Of course, none of this is reflected on here. But this Radar magazine is laying down this narrative for us. The Radar magazine, oh, come on. Freaking mouse pointers. I'm going to have to wire these things in, so I'm sorry about that, guys. Then they have the Dirty Harry cover. Now, keep this in mind, okay? Dirty Harry, this is Prince Harry. Prince Harry marries Meghan Markle. And we believe that Harry may have met Meghan Markle at a social institution called Soho House, which is owned by Ron Burkle and Yusef Jackson, the owner of this magazine. In other words, the owner of Radar, Yusef Jackson at this time, the previous owner was Jeffrey Epstein. The owner of Radar, along with his colleague, co-owner at Soho House, Ron Burkle, introduce, years later, Meghan Markle to this Prince Harry, who he then marries and then leaves the crown, leaves the royal family. And that's Brexit. What's also strange is that that's Brexit. Meanwhile, Megxit is Meghan Markle and Harry getting kicked out of England. But then there's Blexit, and Blexit is covered by Candace Owens, who had her hate crime deal handled by, of all people, Yusef Jackson's dad. And Candace Owens, who's working with a woman at her startup company named Zoe Weiner, whose dad, Mark Weiner, one of the pallbearers at his funeral, was Yusef Jackson, with Jesse Jackson there, and Bill Clinton there, and Hillary Clinton there. And there's like 20 other names that were at that funeral. All that matter. All top fundraisers and tech writers. Because there is a very weird constellation of coordination between the timelines of Candace Owens and Meghan Markle, which involves when they have their kids, marrying rich, white, pasty English royalty, which it involves Yusef Jackson, Jeffrey Epstein, Ron Burkle, Harvey Weinstein. It's the same time, same people producing the same colored kids at the same time. And then also oddly enough, what the hell? Let's throw Nicky Hilton in there. She's also marrying a Rothschild, billionaire royalty over in England. Of course, that happens a few years later. But nonetheless, her first marriage was to this Todd Meister, whose dad introduced, supposedly, Les Wexner and Jeffrey Epstein. Although I think that whole backstory is a lie. I actually suspect the more I look into it, it was really always about Rob Meister. Rob Meister used Jeffrey Epstein as an intermediary. And why not? Rob Meister is one of the largest landowners in all of Palm Beach. His family's definitely billionaires. He was a vice president at AON, which represents like what? How many of the floors above the strike zone of the World Trade Center on 9/11? I know these are somewhat loose correlations I'm throwing out there right now, but it's impossible for all of these things to be happening. It's impossible for this to be just random coincidence. We are way beyond any possibility that this is just random coincidence at this point. Jeffrey Epstein is a peripheral thing. He's used indirectly. And after 9/11, because what happened on 9/11 isn't what they wanted to happen on 9/11, they wanted to have a biological terror attack. They wanted to have DNA vaccines mandated on the U.S. military. They wanted those DNA vaccines to be tracked by the Winberg Cancer Research Center using NCR, using infrastructure that was set up by Robert Malone. That's what they wanted, and they didn't get it. After that, Jeffrey Epstein, eventually, his relationships with the media was used for narrative control, and at some point it was U-turned. It was U-turned into Jeffrey Epstein, the pedophile. That's all you need to know. That's what it all became. And you can see, if you look at these maps and if you look at the names, almost everything that's in a Whitney Webb book was already being written about in 2006 and 7. Whitney Webb came out of nowhere. There was no Whitney Webb, and then in 2016, Whitney Webb was there, and she knew everything about Jeffrey Epstein, who he met, when he met them, gun running, drug running, this and that. It was all documented. Trump bad, CIA, blah, blah, blah. It was all documented. But what's weird is I started this in 2016, kind of. Motivated by nothing more than, why can't people talk about the drug epidemic? And here we are 10 years later, and she hasn't advanced at all. She's still there. Nothing has been learned. Nothing. And it's not because it was all right. I'll tell you what, if I had that as a starting base, oh my goodness, I would be so much further right now because I would have invalidated the stuff that was wrong. She's gotten nowhere. Nothing. No progress. Zero. Goose egg. No progress. No mistakes. When was the last time you ever heard Whitney Webb say, oh, I was so wrong about that person? How many times have I said that? Thousands. I make mistakes. I get things wrong. And I correct. I'm like, okay, let's reconnect the dots. I admit there's a bunch of things on this show today I'm going to have to clarify and improve upon. But that's going to keep happening. I make progress. Things change. If you say you've been here for 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years, you've always been here, and all of these horrible things still happened, then you are the very definition of a traitor and a failure. That's it. I would be ashamed to admit that I knew all this stuff for 20, 25 years and didn't do anything about it and have made no progress. You're not real if you're not making progress. You can't have all the answers and then claim victory for 25. You can't do it. I love talking about people without having to say their names, and they know that they are absolutely abysmal failures and traitors. I don't have to say their names because they know who they are. I've made progress. Point is if you're looking for a record that all of this stuff about Epstein was being written down in a book, in a guideline, in a script that someone could then be hired, or several people could be hired to then promote on the internet. All you need to do is go through the magazine that Jeffrey Epstein himself owned. Jeffrey Epstein's very own magazine is used as the source for what Jeffrey Epstein is. His own magazine is used as the source for the mythology. Almost as if he's exactly the type of person, if he is an intelligence agent, which he is, he would plead guilty to things he didn't do precisely for the reasons which I've so clearly articulated. I think no more progress today. I have some letters to read for tomorrow's show. Prince Andrew. Prince Andrew is a friend of Jeffrey Epstein. Who is he married to? Prince Andrew is married to, or was married to. Again, I'm not a royal family person, so. Fergie. Okay. I gotta get that tightened up. Yeah, Princess Fergie. And Fergie was a follower of India's Satya Sai Baba. So we have Fergie of Prince Andrew following Satya Sai Baba of India. We have Maduro of Venezuela, recently arrested, who is a follower of Satya Sai Baba. We have at least one of the children of Fidel Castro following Satya Sai Baba of India. Gee, that's kind of odd. Why can't anyone else put that together? Instead, it's all a bunch of disparate points. And previous to Maduro of Venezuela was Hugo Chavez. Some people like Hugo Chavez. I don't know much about Hugo Chavez. Look, the people in Venezuela are free to elect whoever they want, as long as that person, is amenable, isn't in the U.S. trying to hurt me. That's people in Venezuela can hire, vote for whoever they want. It's not my business. If he's a communist or whatever, it's not my business. I think the U.S. needs to mind its own business a little bit more in some cases. But upon the death of Hugo Chavez, the U.S. representative that was most vocal in going to Venezuela and honoring Hugo Chavez, I guess that's the right word. You know who that was? Well, of course you know. Because here we are. Let's go back to Radar Magazine. It was Jesse Jackson. It was the father of Yusuf Jackson. It was the father of the person that bought Jeffrey Epstein's magazine. The daddy of the person that bought Jesse Jackson, that bought Jeffrey Epstein's magazine. It also represents one of the biggest U.S. groups in working with and supporting Hugo Chavez, and then subsequently Maduro. Yes, Sean Penn Obama. Sean Penn was the cover of the last issue of Talk magazine, funded by Harvey Weinstein. Harvey Weinstein is a business partner of Jeffrey Epstein. Harvey Weinstein is also the only person that scored a video interview of Harvey Weinstein in the last 8 years is that very same Candace Owens. The very same Candace Owens whose career, whose timeline, and whose professional and social network, click, 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 has many clicks that line up with the timeline of Meghan Markle. Meghan Markle gets introduced to Prince Harry at an institution that's owned by the owner of Radar Magazine. Candace Owens is working with startup money and with a family who is richly in bed with Jesse Jackson, Ron Burkle, and so on. There's a bunch of other names I can't think of right now. Not a coincidence. I don't know exactly what it means yet, but it's not a coincidence. I do not subscribe to the 100% long-term 40-year plan. They knew everything was going to happen like this in detail. I don't think so. I think that the big agenda may have a vision like that, such as the Human Genome Project has been sort of meandering along for 100 years. But when it comes to, how exactly you would use someone like a Meghan Markle or Candace Owens, whatever, things like that, it fluctuates. There's constant, script readjustment, etc. I'm still not exactly sure on all the details, but I know when you reach a point of an abundant level of a coincidence, what's the word? Coordination is I can't believe I got the phrase wrong right now, but you just can't overlook it. Coinky dinks. That's a good word. There have been a lot of very interesting things, notable things happening recently with the Crown in England, or there was a castle lockdown. There's been a lot of security discussions regarding the royal family recently. And it is said to be responses to shocking things which have come out in these Jeffrey Epstein files. I'm sure it's related, but again, I think that the nature of what the shock is being misrepresented. I don't know anything about Prince Andrew, really. Has he participated in criminal behavior? I don't know. I guess it's possible. But it's probably not, a compromised photo that's doing it. That's a cover story. There's other things going on here that are way bigger than that. If we are right about the big agenda, and I'm almost 100% sure that we are, the big agenda would require the citizens to be talking about compromised photos and not about recognizing what that big agenda was. They would much rather people be hyper-focused on kitty pics, girl pics, cannibalism, sex videos, sex tapes, and all that other stuff than saying, wow, the entire world map is being reorganized in order to facilitate reorganizing all of society into with people being experimental test animals without them knowing about it. That's not something that narrative isn't going to fly. At least they don't think it is. I, on the other hand, think it could. I think that there's middle ground. I think more people are capable of being adults about that. Maybe not right away, but than most people think. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I think that there's middle ground for people to go, okay, so, the world, government groups want to take things in this direction. How do we meet in the middle? How can we accomplish those goals but still treat people humanely? I think we could do that. And if we can't, well, then I'm wrong. But you know what? I'd like to believe that we could try to do that. But they would really rather people, read all the other garbage out there and go along with that first. So, Harry and Meghan supposedly going back to UK for the Invictus Games. Really? Well, good for them. I don't have, again, good for them. That's their business. I don't know. I don't know about the people claim to have all of these ideas about, are they really married? Are they not married? They get along. I don't know. I have no idea. That's their relationship. That's their thing. I don't know. I can't get into their heads. But it does seem to matter because, well, look at all the media that's been invested in it, and then there's this Candace Owens story. And I'm also starting to wonder, as I've had some discussion with some of you about this, was Brexit itself infiltrated? Meaning, because the farmer family in England put a lot of money towards supporting Brexit, probably well-meaning, wanting to preserve England's autonomy, fence it off a little bit against the EU. Was that also infiltrated? Maybe the best way to get control over Europe is to break it up a little bit. And right now, Europe is very unstable. And I see some other nations, doing deals with all of these individual European nations. It's almost as if the break off of Britain from the European Union provided an opportunity to get more influence and control over England that wouldn't have happened otherwise. So the fact that you have this breakup, all this negativity about the royal family and the Brexit. In other words, you have Brexit, Megxit, and Blexit all within the same group of people. I think it's safe to assume infiltration in any group. I think so as well. I think that's it would be, as I've said, Katniss, right? You don't want to be the group that nobody wants to infiltrate. If nobody wants to infiltrate your group, then that means that you're totally irrelevant. That doesn't mean you want to be infiltrated, but you want to have people want to infiltrate you in order to accomplish something. So it's a sign of hey, you know what? Isn't it like a compliment, right? It's like, boy, our house is so dirty, no one even wants to break in. Maybe it's something like that. It's like, wow, I don't know. You know what I'm trying to say. Cambridge Analytica, yeah, that was with Bannon. I haven't deep dived into the Cambridge Analytica stuff. But I'm glad that you threw that out there, Reginald. Thank you. So that was the last things here. Peter Thiel. What about Peter Thiel? Is he like one of the space vampire zombie guys? Was that he's one of those futurists. Oh yeah, Peter Thiel. Yeah. And Peter Thiel is also he had his private wealth was managed. I don't believe it still is, but was for a little while managed by a guy named Eric Weinstein, brother of Brett Weinstein. Yeah, the Peter Thiel companies up in Vancouver. We've done some work on them. You probably remember them. I've kind of flushed it out of my mind a little bit, but that's why I archive stuff, because there's no way to keep track of it all. It can be deceiving. I can't keep all this stuff in my head, so I'm constantly flushing stuff out. There's like the working set, the current knowledge base, the current topic, but it's really important to have an archive for that purpose, something that you can search, have on your hard drive. I just can't keep track of it all. I'll never remember how I even came to half of those conclusions, correlations again, unless I had the notes on it. I can't remember it all. I could pick it up again quickly though, because I have it written down and I have it documented, and I did the work of saving the sources. What time is it right now? Oh, it's 4:30. I think it's time. I think it might be time to get the oven on. We have a delicious dinner tonight. You know what it's going to be. It's Valentine's Day. I hope you guys are well. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting Mark Kulak, KULACZ, Houstonic.live. Did I even play any music? I don't think I did play any music earlier. Let's see here. No, there we go. I just kind of discovered this stuff. This stuff really. This is actually from the soundtrack of a movie called The Gentleman. It's been kind of fun. I want that one. There's one song I heard. That's not it. No. I don't know if this is it. This one is called Reduce Market Value. I'm just going to play it. It could be terrible. Thank you guys for listening. Oh, yeah, I love hearing the Grampy, too. Oh, best thing I ever recorded. Love of my life. That is the love of my life. I love you guys very much. Thank you. Take care. God bless. A little bit of music on the way out. Stay positive. Keep having fun. And keep doing the real work.